Before we start the video, I recently created a YouTube membership for my channel. You can be a member by hitting the join button next to the subscribe button under the video. I have a level you can join at as low as 99 cents. By becoming a YouTube member, you get cool badges, and when you comment on my videos, I see it all the time, and I will respond and heart your comment. I also have a Patreon out there too, so whichever service is more comfortable for you, you can join. I really appreciate every single one of you, and I will continue to make you proud. Thank you all, and let's start the video.
Welcome to the world of Tales from the Trip.
As my friend isn't here anymore to tell his tale, I will tell it for him. He was a heavy user of the stuff. I was at his place for a 2-week vacation, and he used it off and on up to several times a day. He knew the stuff was bad, and even complained that the pharmacist providing him with his fix kept stocking the cans. I told him, "Hey, you always go there to buy it." I always hated him huffing it. It was very noisy. The groaning and coughing just sounded awful. I told him so, but he ignored it. Then he came with the brilliant idea to increase the sensation even more by combining huffing with laying in a so-called sarcophagus, a foam rubber coffin-like contraption lined with black rubber and fitted with zippers to provide the total enclosure he so coveted. I said to him that he shouldn't do it that way, but he did it anyway. I also said that I would not check on him, but he ignored that too. After the loud groaning noises, he quieted down, and after a half an hour, I checked on him nonetheless. He was breathing like he always does when high. I left him then, and after returning some 20 minutes later, I didn't hear any breathing anymore. I opened the zippers, pulled back the heavy rubber, and saw him with foam coming out of his mouth. I knew he was dead. I tried to get him out, failed, and started to reanimate him while pushing aside the rubber. The air I breathed into him came out with a gurgling sound. I had tried to reanimate a dead body. I dialed 112, the European version of 911. The ambulance was quick to arrive. I showed the body I was still reanimating. Another ambulance arrived. I was sent out of the room as the 5 people working moved the furniture away and extracted my dead friend from the sarcophagus. I heard the beeps of the reanimation machine. It did not give shocks, so I now knew for sure he was dead. I called my girlfriend, who couldn't believe it. The medic came from the room and told me he was dead. I called his mother, who wanted to drive over right away. Later, I got a call from her sister-in-law that her brother would drive her to the house, some 600 kilometers away. The medics left, and a detective from the police took me aside and asked what had happened. I gave a true account of what he had done. He wrote everything down like they do. I showed him the can, which was put into a bag. He asked how it worked. I told him he would spray onto a towel and sniff it. He pointed at a towel on the floor, but I told him it was still in the coffin. It was extracted and also put into a bag. A rookie cop also asked questions. I ignored him. I tried to call my mom, but she wasn't home. I called a colleague to ask advice. He was shocked about what happened. Eventually, workers from the morgue arrived and tried to lift the heavy body into their coffin. They dropped the body because they were clumsy. The body was taken away, and I was left alone in the house, far away from home. I watched TV all night, but it didn't really register. Then I tried to sleep, which of course I couldn't. Then, in the middle of the night, his mother arrived, and I prepared a place to sleep for them. The next morning, I got a train ticket and left. I think he even enjoyed it. I feel like he floated away on a cloud of chloroethane. He He looked peaceful when I found him, even with the froth around his mouth. They haven't released the body yet, now for 4 days pending autopsy, but they let his mother wish him farewell. For me, the last few days were hell, but for his mother, it is infinitely worse. She's lost everyone now. I chatted with a good friend about their recent experiences using Kratom. They'd enjoyed using it at low doses for a stimulant effect and recommended I try it. At the time, 4 years ago, it seemed like a low-risk recreational drug to experiment with, and I was curious about its opiate-like effects and treatment for anxiety. I'd been applying to jobs at the time, so I wasn't using any cannabis out of good measure in case I needed to pass a drug test. At the time, there wasn't much research publicly available on Kratom's potential hepatotoxicity. Before I purchased any Kratom leaf powder, I'd done my research, of course, and talked with my friend extensively about how he'd been preparing it. I think at the time there were a few experience reports about Kratom's potential hepatotoxic effects, but not much mainstream info about it. I really wish now that I hadn't stupidly overlooked that info. My friend had been preparing Kratom tea using about 2 grams of dried leaves per day. I was concerned I might not like the taste, so I chose to go the route of pills instead. I extensively researched the most reputable online Kratom retailers and purchased about 40 grams of premium Kratom powder capsules. Mind you, I've had my fair share of experiences with opiates and prescription drugs, having dabbled in recreational use of just about everything from Ambien to morphine and oxycodone. I wasn't expecting much of a strong narcotic or sedative effect from Kratom in comparison to my prior experiences getting knocked out cold after chugging half a bottle of codeine cough syrup. I'd been in recovery for about 2 years and had only been using cannabis semi-often and alcohol occasionally at that point. If I was expecting any opiate-like effects from the Kratom, I expected it would be something that would slowly creep up on me. I started by swallowing about 2 grams, poured myself a big glass of water, turned off all the lights in my apartment, and settled into bed to watch Futurama and wait for the effects. After 1.5 to 2 hours after taking the capsules, I started to feel a nice, warm, and floaty sensation. It was a head high, sort of like I had just taken a painkiller, minus the annoying side effect of being relentlessly itchy and restless. It was a nice feeling. That nice feeling wasn't worth nearly as much pain it caused me later, though. I spent the next couple of hours just relaxing on the couch before I felt so nauseous and dizzy, I chose to just try to sleep it off. I woke up feeling like I had one of the worst hangovers, nausea, fatigue, and generally just feeling a lot of malaise. I moped around that day waiting for the effects to subside, but they never did. I spent the next few days laying low, suspecting I'd come down with the flu. I don't remember if I had the week off work and school, or if I'd taken it off, because I remember spending most of this time either sleeping or waking up feeling constipated and nauseous. That gradually started to subside later that week. About 2 weeks after taking the first dose, I decided to try 2 grams of the Kratom powder capsules again. I figured the first time was just spoiled by that suspected flu or food poisoning or whatever I'd had. As with the last time, I reserved taking the Kratom for a time I could stay at home and really feel the effects. This time, I vomited about 1 hour after taking the pills. I figured it just hadn't settled well and stupidly decided to take 2 more grams after drinking a glass of water. This time it stayed down, but I felt increasingly more nauseous the more time went on. I felt unbearably nauseous, and after trying to fight through it for the next several hours, I elected to just go to bed instead. I woke up feeling feverish, weak, and with a dull, throbbing pain in the right side of my abdomen. I would cycle between 15 to 35 minutes of intense pain and 30 to 45 minutes of dull pain. I tried to go to work 2 days later, but ended up needing to go home before I even left the car to go vomit. I sat on the floor in my bathroom, sweating and racking my brain as to what had been causing this. This time I chalked it up to food poisoning. I think in the back of my mind, I knew I really screwed up something with the Kratom. Less than a week or so later, my symptoms were only getting worse. I couldn't keep anything but Gatorade and water down. I was constantly nauseous, and the pain in my abdomen had been getting worse and more frequent. I couldn't even lie on my right side without being in pain. I was constipated, and my excrement was completely pale, almost white. After one fun evening spent writhing around in pain on the couch and realizing I hadn't eaten in 3 days, I finally called a cab to take me to urgent care, suspecting either appendicitis or some severe case of food poisoning which they could diagnose for me. The physician asked me to rate my pain on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst. I gave it an 8. She did an abdomen exam and said I needed to go to the ER so they could do a CAT scan. The first time I went to the ER, they shot me with some morphine and sent me home with a prescription for Zofran for my nausea. The ER doctor had infuriatingly chalked up my intense pain to PMS cramps. I had already had morphine when I spoke with him, so I was pretty amicable to just wait it out and see if things resolved themselves. The second time I went to the ER was 2 days later, and this time I saw the same ER doctor. "Oh, in again, huh?" he mused. No shit, I was in intense pain and still hadn't been able to eat. At this point, I was operating on about 6 days of only Gatorade and the half cup of rice I was able to keep down. This time he ordered a CAT scan and they found my liver was so enlarged it was pushing up against my other organs at my rib cage, which was probably what was causing some of my discomfort. They immediately ran a blood test and found basically all my liver enzymes, my bilirubin and ALT levels particularly, were abnormally high. My bilirubin was somewhere around 3.9. Normal total bilirubin should be less than 1.9. The doctors were mystified as to what caused it. They kept asking if I was a heavy drinker. I wasn't, and never had been. It didn't look like liver cirrhosis, but all I could think was that my history with abusing opiates, or like the handful of Tylenol I'd taken in my life, had finally caught up with me. An ultrasound came out all clear from my kidneys. I saw physicians who did several abdominal examinations, and the only thing that they could come up with was that I had a recent gallstone that passed, or some sort of gallbladder blockage into the liver. I had tested for hepatitis A, B, and C, and was all clear. The physician had come in for a blood test to monitor my liver enzymes every day for the next 2 weeks. The bilirubin gradually dropped to normal levels, and my physician more or less chalked it up to an unidentified liver blockage. It took about 7 to 8 weeks for my nausea and pain to fully subside. I flushed the remaining 30 grams of Kratom down the toilet. I haven't gone back to check up on whether that whole ordeal caused any permanent liver damage. I'm too scared to find out. It's now years later that I'm seeing plenty of other people online share almost identical experiences to mine. Whether I've just got a gene that makes Kratom completely toxic to my liver, or the Kratom powder I purchased contains something else in it, I probably won't know. As far as I know, the online retailer I purchased my Kratom from is still in business. I'm never taking Kratom again, and would strongly urge anyone considering Kratom as a safe plant to reconsider until there's either more regulation of Kratom products or more research done. Just because they're legal doesn't mean they're safe, as you have found out so far, and with the next 2 stories I'm going to read for you. But before we do that, something else that's legal is liking this video and subscribing if you haven't already. Also, turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any new upload. Alright, let's move on to the next story. I used to use Blue Lotus tincture frequently. I started using back in early 2013 because I read it relieves anxiety and wanted something to help me relax. The first time I used it, I put 10 droppers full in my mouth for about 20 seconds, then swallowed slowly. I didn't notice much the first time I used it, besides feeling slightly relaxed. I kept using the same dose every day, and within a month, I noticed little tiny white lights with pairs of eyes everywhere, and black and white humanoid-looking spirits started appearing. The longer I used the Blue Lotus tincture, the more vivid and clear the little tiny white lights with pairs of eyes and black and white humanoid-looking spirits would be. The black and white humanoid-looking spirits did not scare me until I started hearing them speak. It's hard to explain, but their voices were like human voices, but you could not hear them like human voices. Their voices seemed to go straight into my head, like they were being channeled. I could tell what direction the voices were coming from, even without seeing them. The more Blue Lotus tincture I would use, the easier it was to see and hear the black and white humanoid-looking spirits. In fact, after long-term use of Blue Lotus, I could now see the black and white humanoid spirits through walls, no matter what direction I was looking. Then after a few months, I would hear banging on closet doors, banging on my bathtub, and banging on my walls. Usually it was one bang, but sometimes it would be 3 bangs in a row. The black humanoid-looking spirits also started shooting this strange electrical energy at me now. At this point, I started getting worried because I felt like I was being attacked by getting this weird electrical energy shot into my body. I can't put into words how it feels to have this energy shot into my body, but they use various strengths. The white humanoid-looking spirits never shot electrical energy at me, but I didn't trust them either. By this point, I find it hard to sleep at night because when I go to bed, all I hear is voices coming from all directions. I also see the humanoid-looking spirits through walls, even with my eyes closed, no matter what direction I face in bed. The only time I am at peace is when I am sleeping, but even my dreams are becoming too real. So I decided to stop using the Blue Lotus tincture because it opened the door to nothing but trouble. It took a while to stop seeing and hearing the humanoid-looking spirits, but to this day, I still see the little tiny white lights and pairs of eyes everywhere. I don't know what those black and white humanoid-looking spirits are, but I hope I never see or hear them again. I just want to live a normal life after that experience. Upon arriving at school one day, I ran into an old friend from a couple years back. I instantly looked into his eyes and saw no color. His pupils were completely dilated. It was like staring into darkness. I approached him and asked how he was doing. He just stared back at me. I just came out and asked him what he was on, and he explained the whole story to me. He just returned from South Carolina where he was kicked out of his dad's house. He told me he was with his cousins when he first experienced a new trip. I thought to myself, whatever he is on looks like it is doing a good job keeping him happy. If you knew him, you would know he looks for the ultimate trip. He said to me, "By far, this is the best trip I have ever experienced." So I said, "What the hell?" and I asked if he wanted to pick some more of it up from the store. He agreed, so we got in my car and left campus at the beginning of first period. On the way to the store, I saw him staring out the window, and I heard him talking to himself or persons unknown, even though there wasn't anyone else in the car. We picked up a load more of these pills and liquid cough syrup. We figured we would head to a friend's house that was out of town. On the way, I asked him how many I should take. He told me he already took a handful of the pills, about 30. I looked at the box and saw that each pill contained 20 milligrams of DXM, so he had already taken 600 milligrams. He told me to take about 30 also. I said why not, grabbed a soda, and washed them down. About halfway to my friend's house, driving still, I started to feel a strange rush. About 2 miles later, it hit me. I told him I didn't think I could drive the rest of the way. He said just relax and let your body do the rest. Well, we finally arrived at our friend's house. Lucky we did, because I couldn't have made it much farther driving in my current condition. We stepped out of the car, and instantly, I hit the ground. I felt like my legs just weren't working. I felt a tingling sensation throughout my body. I looked at my friend and said, "My hair is growing." It was an awesome feeling. I managed to get up and get to my friend's porch. I told him to go inside and wake up our friend. While he was inside, he took another handful of the pills, about another 30. I remained outside where I sat, tilted my head back in the chair, and felt the breeze rush across my body. I had no control over my legs, and my eyes felt like they were taped open. I heard a door close inside the house, and I could feel the vibrations run up my legs, moving up my body, then out of my head. It was a trippy feeling. I thought to myself that this was the greatest feeling anyone could possibly experience. Both my friends came out and helped me into the house where I sat on the couch for a while. I saw the door to the porch swing open, and I heard laughing in the distance. The friend I left school with walked in, and as he was walking in, he tripped over a cable that was on the floor in front of the door. He spun around, and the back of his head landed on a glass table that was in the living room. I heard a deafening bang. I looked down, and he was out cold. I regained feeling in my legs immediately and ran over to him. I grabbed him and tried to see if he was just joking, but he wasn't breathing. I picked him to his feet. It felt like the life poured right out of him. He began shaking uncontrollably, and the shaking began to move up my arms. I was still tripping hard. I could feel his shakes go throughout my body, then back into his. I thought to myself, this is the end of his life, and it is my fault. I dropped into an instant state of depression. That whole day passed through my head in seconds. The friend that owned the house had to run and wake up his older brother, who immediately called 911. I sat and thought about all the consequences. I was tripping hard, and the ambulance should be here any second. I reached into his pocket looking for the pills and found a wadded up piece of school paper. Upon opening it, I found at least another 60+ pills. I threw them in the trash and hid out in the bedroom until the ambulance left with my friend in it, still unconscious. To this day, I still have flashbacks of this event.